Welcome back for our latest episode of Boardroom RevOps, where we're bringing you valuable tips from RevOps experts so you can make it to the C-suite. I'm James, co-founder of accounting, the RevOps BI platform. If you consume any SaaS-related media, you're probably familiar with today's guest, Kyle Norton. Kyle is the CRO at Owner.com, business management platform for local restaurants that is growing like mad and just raised a big Series C. Kyle, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Kyle's reputation is one of the more operationally savvy CROs, and so I thought it'd be interesting to kind of step into his thought process around ops, how it relates to RevOps, and also AI. And so maybe we can start, Kyle. I want to dive into how you think about resourcing, organizing ops, both RevOps and BizOps, to drive AI and go to market. But before we dive into those weeds, maybe taking a step back, and I'm going to make this question intentionally broad. How do you even think about AI as the CRO of a Series C company?
Oh, that is a very broad question. I think like many, the ChatGPT moment happened and it broke my brain. I just kept thinking of all of the different things that were now possible. And like you said, I've been very systems engineering oriented, very operationally oriented throughout my career. And so this was in particular an exciting moment for me because it just felt like I was getting access to a completely new set of tools. But in that first year, it was really just wandering around in the wilderness. And I wasn't very structured or strategic in terms of how I thought about using AI in the business. I think we had good intuition or we were just lucky. And we used AI in a few places that were correct sequentially. We really focused on AI for our data foundations, both first party and third party data. And now in retrospect, we're approaching 3 years into this phase change. I think I have more distance to look at things and have an opinion of how companies should be applying AI. But for us, it was very much looking at our data foundations, looking at how we use AI to understand who we should talk to in the market, what was happening in our sales cycles, in our customer journey. And then we started to place some thoughtful bets on use cases. The first thing was internal tools. We built our own ML models for lead scoring, propensity to buy, deal size. And then Data Lane, which is a third-party data provider, was one of our first big bets, and that had a dramatic impact on our ability to prospect because we got leads enriched at a ridiculous rate for mobile phone numbers and contact accuracy. Then we layered Momentum on to automate a bunch of stuff. What are all the things that a rep is spending time on that we think could be automated in a completely new way, because AI just lets you do so many more, Gen AI specifically, so many more unique things. And then we layered on Avara, which is an AI sales simulator, because coaching is a big part of what we prioritize. OneMind now is our in-market experiment to give an AI avatar native customer experience. So more of our buying journey. And so we've been in market for a few months with really exciting results. But that's our first market facing use case, which I think is different than many people. And then Pavlov is customer journey experimentation throughout our onboarding and post-sales journey. So there's a few different things, but mostly behind the scenes, which I think is different because everybody just wants to do the AIS.
Yeah, definitely. I want to cover that as well. But this is super interesting. And I think you mentioned a lot of things. And I think a lot of folks are still maybe where you were at a couple of years ago, doing that kind of wandering in the forest of I know I should be using AI, but I don't exactly know how. So if I were to kind of summarize what you just said, it sounds like the two main categories, if I were to bucket them, would be on the data side, how can we get access to data that was maybe hard to analyze before or just hard to obtain, that phone number data you mentioned. It's just time savings of repetitive tasks that we want to automate. Is that the kind of the mental model that you think about in terms of the things that AI can do well?
Yeah. When I think about the pyramid, so for us, it's the bottom of the pyramid is data foundations, first party, third party. Third party is, do you understand your market? Do you understand what accounts in your market are the best fit for you? And can you enrich them to deeply understand them for outreach and sequencing purposes? Then can you get high quality contact data? And then can I find mobile phone numbers for people? In the US specifically, there's no privacy. You can get anybody's cell phone number. So for outreach purposes, that's tremendously impactful. And then from a first party data perspective, what is happening throughout our customer journey, and how do we better structure that data so that we can make better decisions. And so that's the momentum piece of it. And so that's information from any customer engagement call. Could be a BDR call, a demo, an onboarding call, post sales, and being able to capture way more information than you could ever ask a rep or a CS person to enter manually into Salesforce. So that's the foundation. Then the next thing is automating as much as you can that's like low value and very repetitive and time consuming, because then you can give your opportunity to do more of the valuable parts of their job. So we always say like RGAs over everything, revenue generating activities over everything. So what can we strip out of people's day to day to let them just like do more sales, do more customer success? That I think is a really amazing place to start, because again, like AI is just like purpose built for that use case. You can start with the AI SDR thing and like you'll get some good hits in the first like couple months, but then unless you have the right instrumentation and the quality of growth marketing team and a data team and a RevOps team to like really like operate this machinery, what you see is those results wane really fast, because you're just getting a bunch of hits because you're carpet bombing your message across the entire market. And yeah, maybe it's a little bit better that with AI, but like that fatigues very quickly. And so I think like the internal foundations are where people should start. Like even Avara for the AI sales sim, like what do you really wish that your teams could do way more of that's repetitive and like time consuming? It's like doing training, doing coaching. You can't have a manager coach every single rep for 2 hours a week, but you can definitely have a rep go spend a couple hours in the sim working on the skills. But again, because you can contain it, we constrain those sims to like very specific instances. We constrain them to like not, hey, sim a demo.
Yeah.
No. Sim, like, how do you open a demo? The agenda. What are the first 2 questions? How do we ask for the business at the end? How do we set next steps? And so they're in like really discrete chunks. And AI works well there because it doesn't have to get super creative in like a big decision space. That's where I find that a bunch of AI stuff goes wrong, is when there's just too much white space for it to operate within.
Yeah, I think from our past conversation, like I even just remember you being really thoughtful around what you should be looking at for the team, like the process. You're very data driven and systematic, and I think that's where a lot of people get AI wrong. Is like they just want to throw AI broadly at a problem space, and you really have to understand like what you're actually trying to replicate very specifically. And so I want to get to like resourcing here shortly, but I guess like how do you have a threshold for when a certain process is AI ready? Like I'm thinking to some of like maybe like the momentum use case, like did you have to have a certain sales methodology like tuned in to figure out what you're going to capture, or like any like foundational stuff you have to kind of know before you implement AI?
You want your like data basics to be there, I would say, before you throw a bunch of stuff on, because AI is just it's a pattern recognition machine. And so if you're giving it bad patterns and there's too much ambiguity or the data's a mess, then AI won't be nearly as impactful. But you definitely don't need like a refined sales methodology in place or tons and tons of structure. I think if you have a consistent use of Salesforce and the reps have like a pretty good adherence, then you can write prompts to pull out specific information out of those call transcripts and just print them into Salesforce fields. Like that was the basics of how we used Momentum to start. And you just have to crawl, walk, run. And yeah, like as you get more and more sophisticated and your methodology gets tighter now, like at the end of a call throughout the whole call, like we have like word by word scripts. And so if it's a new rep that's learning our system, we can understand like how closely have they adhered to our scripting down to the word. But that's not possible. Like that's not possible when you're, founder-led sales. You got 2 reps just doing all sorts of like different things.
Yeah.
But you can always find something in there. But I would just be thoughtful. I think one of the other mistakes people make with AI is it's very reactive. And so they see something cool on LinkedIn, or somebody reaches out to them, or your buddy's using some tool. So you take a demo, you're like, yeah, this is great. Like, let's do this. But unless that vendor or tool is tied to one of the important things in your business, it's like never really going to get a lot of traction. And so I encourage people to be thoughtful about like, what are the priorities? Be proactive instead of reactive. Be proactive in saying, what are the biggest priorities in my business? Where are the areas that I need to improve? And then go out and say, like, how are people solving this with AI? And a great place to start is like, ask AI how to solve that problem with AI. You can brainstorm and then reach out to folks, and if you have a bit of a network, you can text your network and be like, hey, like I'm looking at this, like, how have you solved this problem? Not all problems need to be solved with AI as well. Just definitely know that.
Super helpful.
That's how I think about it.
Yeah, super helpful to hear how you guys are actually doing it at Owner. As we think about like what it takes to do this, you started to touch a little bit on like the data side, but even pulling back from that a little bit, like from a RevOps BizOps perspective, like what does it take to do this well? We can start with team and organization. We can continue on data, like maybe wherever you think is most important from like a RevOps perspective.
Yeah, so you have to know what game you're playing. Like we hopped on the call and you were talking about your bootstrapping, and like that's not the game I'm playing. Like we're very much not playing a bootstrap game. We've grown from 2 to well over 50 million ARR in like a little over 3 years, but we've raised a bunch of money along the way. And so my approach isn't going to be everybody's approach. And you have to understand like how are you approaching your business, and you want congruence between your business and fundraising strategy to your go-to-market to then how you think about resourcing. Because I only left Shopify because I believed Owner had the opportunity to be a giant generational company and we could make a dent on the world. And so we've been playing that since I joined, well, even before then. And so I invested really heavily in RevOps much earlier than would be the norm. Same thing with BizOps and data. Like our BizOps and data team is massive compared to what you'd think like a 300 employee Series C company would be. Same thing with RevOps. Like the RevOps team, it's like full-time people. It's like 6 people, maybe 7. And then a bunch of contractors doing dev work. Same thing with the data team. The data team is a bunch of people. We just hired a full-time GTM AI lead. We've got an analyst dedicated to just my part of go-to-market. We've got a data scientist started that's just focused on this. Like, there's a lot of resources, but that's because we are building the business for big scale. Those headcount numbers won't necessarily scale as the business scales. We're making an upfront investment to get really efficient, even though you would look at it and be like, man, you got seven RevOps people and you only have like 30 sales reps. Like that seems overweight. But when you look at the efficiency on a per rep basis of our team, when you look at the growth, when you look at the ROI that those projects drive that come out of the RevOps team, it makes a ton of sense. You have to have an open-minded CEO and the credibility to make that case, because it can definitely go wrong and skew your CAC and LTV CAC pretty badly. We get a really good return, and we have great leadership in both those teams. That's a prerequisite. But yeah, so we've resourced it heavily, and it's now, we just hired a head of go-to-market architecture, like a senior Salesforce architecture person. And he came in and he's like, I never expected, but your documentation's really good. And actually this is like the systems aren't on fire, and it actually, things are super solid. And usually the story is somebody like a senior technical person joins and it's like, oh my God, we have to rebuild everything, and it's all on fire. Yeah, you basically have to start over, but we don't have to do that. So now this person gets to come in and build a bunch of things on top of it, which is a significant advantage for us growing from 50 to 100 to 200, 500 million ARR, because we're not going to have to do big rebuilds, big replatforms along the way.
Yeah.
But we're doing it because we're playing for a really big outcome, and we've been okay to spend the money up front. And it's all worked out.
Yeah, I think listeners will be so jealous. I chat with people every day where it's 1, maybe 2 RevOps folks at a Series B or C company, and I think folks often just don't invest, and it's really painful for the RevOps folks, and there's a lot of issues that arise on the go-to-market front too.
And it seems crazy to me.
Right?
For me, it's so obvious, but it's very much my orientation to be like systems oriented, and the payoff has been there. So I don't know, like either that leader doesn't have the credibility to make the business case, or the founder can't see it and you need to introduce them to other people, send this podcast to them to help make your case. But yeah, I think it is, those two teams are a big competitive advantage for us. Just like systems and architecture and infrastructure it's a competitive advantage if you do it right.
Yeah. Anything you needed to change to support AI? I think you mentioned like a go-to-market AI analyst potentially. I know you have a big
A
data
lead,
team.
yeah.
A lead, yeah. So how'd you think about like augmenting the team for AI specifically, if at all?
So that person has just started. So we've done all of this without dedicated AI people. I have, like, from the very beginning been beating the AI drum and saying like, hey, look, like this is a massive competitive advantage or opportunity for us. I want to go take it. And so I set the expectation with my senior leaders that like they need to be learning, they need to be staying up front, up to speed on stuff, and I wanted to be investing aggressively. So we didn't put a bunch of resources in place to do AI stuff. I think we invested heavily in the team in general. We have a lot of data. We have a lot of data support because the AI stuff won't work without great data foundations, as we've talked about. And honestly, like it's been everybody. It's been me, it's been the SLT members, it's been our RevOps and BizOps leaders. Everybody is trying to think in a way that is AI first as much as we can without chasing vapors and just like applying AI to stuff
Just for the sake of AI. Yeah, totally. This is super helpful. And you open me up for a plug of Accounting. If you don't have the resources to invest in a big data team, consider Accounting to get your data in order.
There you go.
You've hired a bunch of people, Kyle, and so I'm curious. I think RevOps. I chat with folks every week that are kind of looking for their next gig. How do I make a good impression? Like, what kind of person are you seeking on your RevOps team? Are there certain traits you're looking for in making these hires?
So now you gave me a layup. So I have a podcast called the Revenue Leadership Podcast. I talk about this topic a lot. And so I get a lot of messages, people being like, hey, like you should bring your VP of RevOps on. Like, I want to do that. And I declined to do it because I just thought it would feel like shameless owner self-promotion. But then somebody else, Jessica Asher, actually, who is a frequent listener, like sent me an email and was like, you need to have Steve on. Like everybody needs to hear what you're doing. And so I interviewed Steve on my podcast and we go into like this in massive depth. So if you want 90 minutes from me on how to build a RevOps team, listen to that. I will say, so the question is what I look for in a RevOps leader, or how should people think about a search?
What you look for. Like if someone listening was interviewing with you, how can they make a great impression? Or like what even are you digging in on?
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time asking about AI and what are people doing and using to accelerate their business with AI today. And then I want to talk to them about talk to me about your personal use cases. Like what do you do day to day in your own workflow? Because if you are not at the forefront on this stuff, it makes me question your level of like curiosity and just like it gives me a feeling like you're going to get left behind. And so it's very much a requirement for me now. I want to see people who are systems thinkers and can break a problem down. I don't just want technical RevOps folks that know how to like do the Salesforce stuff. Really, like the reason Steve, who's my VP of RevOps, is so good is it's not just about like taking requirements and building stuff that the business needs. It's about being a strategic partner to those functional leaders to say, okay, like tell me why you need it and how are you thinking about the problem set, like how are we sure that this is the root cause? And we use this opportunity solution tree framework to try to get to this, the heart of a problem. And I think the other thing that I really want to see is like, so it's the problem solving and business acumen outside of just the RevOps stuff. an interest in AI. And then you need the philosophy is really important to me. So Steve articulated this well on our podcast, but like and I think the best RevOps leaders inherently believe that people want to do the right thing. And I've worked with some RevOps leaders who do not believe that. They think that you need to like box the rep in and you can't let them do a bunch of stuff because, they're going to be lazy or they're going to make the wrong decisions or they want to cut corners. But like we genuinely believe that people want to do a good job. If you can take friction out of their way for them to do a good job, they will. And I just think this mindset pervades like everything else that you do. Your design decisions and how you problem solve and the tools that you build. Because I think people feel it. Like I think when you don't trust, when your RevOps and business systems imply to your team that you don't trust them, they will act in a way as if you don't trust them.
It's self-fulfilling for sure.
Yeah, it's the weirdest. It's like the weirdest thing, but I and it seems like a little woo-woo, but I genuinely want a team of people that have this servant leadership mentality and are trying to do and build things to make the reps' lives better on a day-to-day basis and help them do the right things. And they are of that mindset because you feel that everywhere. Because this, like, your tech stack is like the water you swim in as a rep. And if it's high friction and gives you a low trust sense, that will be a big part of the culture of your team.
Yeah. Is there anything you do to cultivate the positive culture that you're talking about? To me, it kind of sounds like I'm sort of like a one-team mentality between RevOps and AEs. Like I know some folks put RevOps on like some element of variable comp to like align incentives, like anything like that you do, or is it really in that kind of selection process up front?
The selection process, definitely. I think like having your RevOps teams deeply embedded in all your team rhythms. So in our SLT meeting, we've got the head of RevOps in that meeting and the head of BizOps. In our functional team meetings, the functional leaders are there from BizOps, enablement, and RevOps. And so there's like a very deep embedding. And so when you take, like, I just got off a call with our launch leadership. Jen, who is the launch RevOps manager, is just a part of that team. She's not like the RevOps representative that's like in their meeting. Like she is just as much a part of the launch leadership team as one of the launch managers that's actually managing people. And so I think that like deep embedding makes a big difference. And then the third thing is you have to build empathy. So like ride-alongs are a really good way to do this. So, all of your functional RevOps people should be spending time like beside a rep, sit down. And Steve, who's the VP, does this himself. This was like, 5 weeks ago now, because I was still in Toronto. Was there for like a full 2 days and just like went and sat beside different reps and watched their workflows. And we like learned all of this stuff. We're like, we were confused and frustrated because the reps didn't do this, but like they didn't even know because it wasn't in their onboarding materials and there's no like trigger to alert them of that thing. And so you just, like it makes you go from like, oh, like what the heck's going on? Like, why aren't these reps doing this thing, to like, oh, this was all our fault. Like,
it's not no way. They're not lazy.
Yeah. And like, you just have to sit beside them and like watch them work to really understand. There's a few different ways you can build empathy, but like, that like real world empathy building is.
Yeah, that's great advice. So many more questions. I feel like you could talk for hours about this. Sadly, we're at time. Anything I should have asked but didn't, Kyle, related to RevOps AI, or do you think we covered it pretty well here?
I will say one thing, like, so James McKay, who's a friend of mine who runs, what's the name of his company? Venn. Yeah, because it's supposed to be revenue. So it's like Venn, he's a RevOps consultant. And this is like when I'm doing advisory, people asking me, like, this is the guy who I send people to. He wrote this article like on the Pavilion newsletter that was like quite critical of RevOps. He's like, why isn't RevOps being taken seriously? And it's like, it's our fault. And he got a lot of heat for it. But I really think that he was getting at something true, where the craft of RevOps, I think, needs to elevate itself in a big way and get out of the place where, they are like an infrastructure team or a reporting and analysis function, and try to be a strategic partner to the business and like
Proactive. Yeah.
deeply embed themselves. And this was the point he was making that people didn't really like seem to catch. They just were angry. But like, how do you elevate your lens to be focused on the exact same things that the CRO or the CEO or the CMO, et cetera, are focused on? And how do you become an enabler of those things? And try really hard to find the word, to try to find a yes or a yes and, or push back in constructive ways. I think this is the biggest difference between, a person that's going to sort of cap out at a director level or a manager level versus somebody who, because you see the great people, that CRO brings them to every single spot. Like, I was talking to a CRO of one company 2 weeks ago, and she was talking about how she was on her third stop with her now VP of RevOps. Steve's been with me for like almost 10 years. Like, those people are there and they get brought along this journey and walked into a job because they know how to unlock their executive partner, and they know how to be in like absolute lockstep with that individual. And so that's the one thing I would say to the RevOps folks listening that want to like really operate at that senior level and feel like they have a seat at the table, is like, just get deeply aligned with the priorities of that leader and find ways to get that team closer to their number, because everything downstream of that will sort of sort itself out.
Yeah, such a good place to end it. I mean, the kind of mission of this podcast is, tips and advice to make it to VP of RevOps. And I think you're spot on with that. We've heard it from other folks who have made it. It's like, how do you become really valuable, become proactive? And I think everything you just touched on is like the perfect playbook to do that. So, Kyle, thanks so much. This was awesome, man. I know you're super busy. I really appreciate you stopping by.
Yeah, thanks for the invite.